Uh, Hello everybody. In today's video, I am IRL maxing. You know, IRL maxing. We're talking about IRL maxing. Kind of ironic, I know. But IRL maxing doesn't necessarily just mean being outside. You can be inside and still be IRL maxing or whatever. But like in today's video, you know, I'm doing it outside. That kind of thing. And socializing is a part of it too. But you socialize when you socialize, and you don't socialize when you don't socialize. You know? Because the whole socializing thing is it's one of the few things where I would say it's socially acceptable to really just go based off of feeling. But you ask me, I'm trying to get canceled, my nigga. Like, I don't know what else to tell you, you know? Because getting canceled is kind of peak now, you know? In order to be a celebrity. Because if you just be you, if you just speak your real opinion all the time, you know? All of a sudden, you're the villain, you know? Even if you're not. Because I guess as they say, either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, you know? But in some cases they do become the good guy. But when people become the good guy, you know, everybody hates them, everybody wants to cancel them. I used to be canceled like 12 different times throughout my life, you know, online. Back when cancel culture was an actual serious threat, you know? Like, I've been doxxed, I've been harassed, I've been bullied, I've been, you know, almost near death many times. Especially pre-2020, you know? Like, I would say the most times I tried to get canceled, or, well, not intentionally, but the most times I, you know, fell into cancel culture was 2016. That was my worst year. You know, I never publicly talk about this too much, because back then I was a lot more chronically online than I am now. But, like, it was just a terrible year, you know? But I never really added in those personal details because, well, they're generally personal, but I'm talking about them because, well, cancel culture is not really much of a threat anymore, you know, and being open about it is not really a issue for me in this current point in time, you know? Like, YouTube, as long as you're not doing anything, like, actually illegal, they don't really give a shit too much, you know? Or, like, copyright, they don't really give a shit too much, you know? Like, people try to make, like, they'll make videos that are, you know, members only, and it's for content that could just be publicly and regularly open on normal YouTube, you know? But I think the only reason why I really see it is for copyright issues. You know, that's the only thing I can really see, you know, being for that kind of stuff. But I would never, if I did members content, I would never make it members only. I might make it members first, but I would never, ever, ever, ever make it, you know, members only, because you're basically hiding content to people that would have otherwise enjoyed it, you know? Like, you're basically saying to your people, to the people that, you know, are subscribed to your channel that aren't members, basically what you're saying is, oh, we're gonna hide certain content from you because you don't have money, you know? Like, that's basically what you're doing. And that's why I'll never, you know, do members only content. Well, anyway, I'm just walking around the same old place, you know, not going much crazier than it's already been, you know, and life's kind of good, you know. Actually, maybe I should turn back over here, physically speaking. one of the hardest things for, I think, people to get into IRL maxing is to actually be around other people. Now, there are some people who do have it really easy. So if you're constantly around other people, if you really love being around other people all the time, find a way to also be used to not being around other people. And if you're a person who spends, most of their time and mostly enjoys not really being around other people, start spending your time, being around other people more. I'm not saying you have to go to the absolute maximum, but I'm just saying try the other side, you know what I mean? To see if it's not really as much of an issue as you thought it was. Even if you have like a shitty life, you can still find a way. Like, brother, I've been canceled a lot. I've been doxxed a lot of times, I've been threatened. And the thing when it comes to this kind of stuff, you try not to talk about it, because if you talk about it too much and you make your whole community, like if you don't get rid of the people or try to keep people from being toxic or being super evil or say, radicalized or extreme, in some form or some way, even if it's stuff that you agree with or disagree with in a lot of cases, but usually agree with, you will be defined by those people if you do not, get rid of the most extreme and change, if you can, the ones that might turn that way, or the most radicalized, or any form of radicalized, really. I mean, there are exceptions here and there. But again, even if it's the stuff you agree with, sometimes it's not really worth it. Actually, a lot of times it's not really worth it. But just because they instantly make you feel uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean that they're instantly evil either. Now, I'm not saying you should have harassment, especially for you men out there. Because women, they're really allowed to say that there's harassment. But at the same time, they're not really allowed to get away with, say, I don't know, what is something that a man can get away with but a woman can't? Perhaps, maybe, I don't know, doing good in sports, that kind of thing. And for men, they got their double standards. Obviously, pedophilia is bad and male pedophiles should go to jail too. I get that, but we also have to, just as much as we acknowledge that, hey, male criminals are bad, we're allowed and we should acknowledge that also female criminals are bad. Duh, obviously, just because you're the weaker sex doesn't mean that in this case you're somehow better. Now, in some cases, both can be abusive, both can be evil, but that depends on what actually happened, and there's a lot of unrecorded stuff, unlike this video, and there's a lot of things I could do, but a lot of the things you could do to help, spread IRL maxing is make your own content revolving around that kind of IRL maxing or whatever they're going to eventually call it, or whatever you want to call it. Start making content like that, and you might go, well, how do I do that? How do I make, IRL maxing content? It's not that very hard. All you have to do is literally just, record yourself, on a video, make a video, sound on, camera on, record yourself, and just, talk about, IRL maxing if that's what you want to do, but you can talk about literally anything, but For me, if you're encouraging specifically IRL maxing, do stuff that makes people want to go offline. I'm not talking like, oh, you did something cringe, or like, oh, like you just said something that's like, oh, I don't want to watch it. I mean, like, do something that makes people like want to live in real life more. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I would do if I could, really. But, or at least try to convince them. But again, like I said in many videos before in the past, and probably in the future, I can only convince you for so long. You have to do it yourself, you know? Because they say it's self-help. So, use yourself and help. So that way, you know, you can rely on yourself. And then you can maybe help rely on others. Or maybe others can rely on you. You know, that kind of thing. Because the whole idea of, I don't need no woman, or I don't need no man, bullshit. Okay? Because it's like, yeah, you're an individual with your own free will, but if you're in a relationship, say like, I don't know, you're married, for example, to like say like you're a man married to a woman. In this example, you're still both a couple, you know? You're still responsible for some of the things that you do, and not responsible for a lot of things that you do, because obviously you're still individuals, but you have to be able to get along and do things with each other, you know, because that's just how couples tend to work, you know, like you need each other, because that's just how that works, you know, when you're a couple that works. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be like every single, you know, green flag or red flag. But, like, when it comes to the major stuff, like, say, I don't know, perhaps religion. Religion's a big one. For some people, you know, they're like, I only date people of the same religion as me. That's fine, you know, that's more socially acceptable, you know. And some people, man or woman, might have a preference of, and again, man or woman, you know, spirituality or same ethnicity or whatever. You know, there's a difference between being racist and just being like, oh yeah, I prefer people who look like me, you know? Like that kind of thing. Because generally most people, they prefer people that are like them in some way, you know? Or a lot of ways. Usually a lot of ways. But not always, you know? And again, you gotta learn how to socialize, and you gotta learn also when you're alone too, you know? You gotta figure out how to balance them out, so to speak, for your Goldilocks zone, you know? And the Goldilocks zone is where, metaphorically speaking, you're in that right zone where you're just figuring it out. You know, like you got it figured out, but then what are you going to do once you get it figured out? Well, now you got your maximum. Just figure out whatever you got, you know? Like, don't just think about, oh, you know, socializing, don't socialize, this or that. You know, that's not like the only thing you have to worry about in life, you know? Like, there are people who have to pay bills, you know? That kind of stuff. There are people who are very political, you know? There are all sorts of things. But again, if you ask me, just like record yourself and talk and do stuff about things you actually like to talk or interested in. And I would say generally speak what your actual thoughts and opinions are, you know? Like, give yourself some thought and some thinking of what you want to say before you say it, especially before you start recording, so that way you have an idea of what you're going to talk about. Or you could be like me and just, like, start talking as soon as you record, you know? But generally I would recommend you think about what you're going to talk about before you start talking about it. And I usually put like the dates or like say some random photo on the video, because it's not that I hate having my face on, you know, the video thumbnail or whatever. It's just, I'm more like, oh yeah, this is like interesting to me or whatever, and you can put on a title, but I usually don't. I usually let YouTube default the title, you know, with whatever the date is, generally speaking. Like, that's what I do. So that way, you know, YouTube is YouTube. That kind of thing. And I do this so that way if I'm like making a video where I'm not really focusing on one particular topic, then it's whatever, you know. I usually only put titles on videos where I only really focus mostly on one topic, that kind of thing. At least for the type of content that I do. You know, it's pretty cheap, pretty easy to make this kind of content, and it's the easiest one you can do practically daily. And I try to do it daily, but, you know, sometimes there are just certain days I don't like to post on for whatever personal reason, or maybe even a public reason, you know? And I'm just out here talking, you know? Talking on a phone. That kind of thing. And I have a lot of, you know, things in my private life. You know, I try to keep my private life private. I'm that kind of guy. You know, there's a lot of things I can do, and there's a lot of things I can't do. You know, and there's a lot of things that are maybe considered a talent, but there are some things that are a skill. Like this way of videoing, you know? Like, I literally watch my own content sometimes, you know? So, or I generally try to, because it helps me improve. It helps me be like, hey, the way I talked or the way I did this may not be exactly right. That doesn't necessarily mean you should delete the video. The only time you should really delete the video is if it's like a serious, like, problem for your channel to have up, you know? Where it's like, not necessarily that you're getting bad reviews or something, it's just more like, you know, you got a copyright strike or something. Something like that. You know? Where it could actually take your entire channel down rather than just that one video. So that's what I would do. You know, there's like hours of content that I literally do not post. Like, I literally had to take off this channel simply because YouTube didn't like it, you know? And it's sometimes hard, but it's a lot easier than a 9-to-5 job. Alright? A lot easier than a 9-to-5 job. Okay? Because in a 9-to-5 job, you have to actually work, you know? Whereas this type of content, it's only as much as work as you're willing to put in. Whereas 9-to-5 job, if you don't put in the work, you might not get money, you know? But here's the thing, is it's kind of strange knowing that people who don't put in much work at all and are in these big businesses get paid all the money, but then it's like all the people who do all the work don't get paid much. It's almost as if like the person on the top, you know, the business owner owns the business. Ooh, shocker, you know. Never trust HR. Never trust HR. Why do I say this? Because HR, or human resources, or whatever they call it nowadays, basically it's just a legal department in disguise for whatever the company wants, you know? Like, maybe there's a chance that the person in HR probably doesn't really realize that completely. But basically what they're really doing is they're just like having a thing so that way if you confess all your stuff about what goes on in the business, they can basically use that if everybody ever sues. You notice how like all the big companies, like 5 or 7 big companies, seemingly never get a lot of lawsuits, even though they probably should. The reason why is because they have HR departments. Okay? They have HR departments, which basically makes it very hard for the employees to sue, because they basically confess everything to them without even realizing that, hey, HR is not on your side. HR is not your friend. You know, even if it's like your own relative or something. It's HR, okay? It's not something to trust. It's not something to work off, you know? It's just a way so that way they don't have to get constant lawsuits or whatever, you know? Make the company look good without actually doing anything good. You know, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. They don't give a crap. They don't give anything of thought to who you are as a person, you know? And even if they did, they would probably still have an HR department, because you never know. You never know, because there's always that one dumbass who spoils everything, you know, when it comes to working. And then there's the news companies. You ever notice that the news companies, like, even though they're like zombie companies or dead companies, they're still around? They're always still around. You know why that is? That is because they're the news. They can pretty much get away with it. Or even though they're a dead company, they still have somewhat of an audience, you know? Because people still want to know the news. In other words, they just want to know about the world, but from that political perspective. At least that's what the news wants you to think, you know? It doesn't matter if you're, you know, say what they call right wing or what they call left wing, or whatever politics you believe in, you know, or religion you're a part of, or race, or, you know, gender you are, or ethnicity or skin tone. These people, unless it's like the weather, and maybe if you're in a good enough, you know, news channel, sports, you're not gonna really know when they're lying to you or not. Especially when it comes to politics, because obviously it's the frickin' news, you know? So it's really hard to just know this stuff. And this individual you are watching right now, not a big fan of the news, okay? Don't get me wrong, there are news stations that have an idea, but even when it comes to those independent news stations, they're not really independent. Like Dylan Page, not so independent, okay? He looks independent, he looks like he's this cool guy, and, you know, like he's really getting the news stories out. Yeah, he might tell you about this African war nobody noticed, but, at least in the West anyway, but on the same time, you ever notice that he has a bias? Like, every news station has their form of bias. There's no truly neutral news station. Like, they're literally a news station. They're meant to tell you stuff. Not exactly completely neutral. Yes, I'm talking about you, Switzerland. Mind it off. Back it off, okay? I'm not trying to beef you about Antarctica right now. But look. Look. Okay? I not really a big fan, you know? Like, there's Asmongold and stuff like that, but that's if you consistently watch it or are really into that stuff. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything he agrees with, you know, in order to enjoy his content. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I disagree with that I watch Asmongold for. You know, I don't like Hassan Piker because, you know, he's one of those guys where you can tell he clearly has a bias. He clearly, you know, is a horrible person. And he basically wants you to agree with everything. And even if you do, you still get punished. You know? You still get treated harshly. Asmongold, unless it's some rare situation, isn't really going to do that to his audience, you know? And you might go, well, how did you talk about, you know, as from the news to Asmongold? or to whatever, what does this have to all do with IRL maxing? Basically, absolutely nothing, but also it's kind of a part of it because it does also somewhat affect the real world, because it's one thing to have, some things go online, go extreme to the point where they become offline, but it's one thing to the point where everything that's extreme online goes offline, that kind of thing. And not so much the reverse, where things that are extreme in real life go online, because when they go online, they kind of dissolve and lose their meaning. Like, for example, racism and sexism, or classism. Those are the big three. Those big three things, they kind of lost their meaning. They kind of lost their power over, the past, I want to say 80 years. And from 2025 to about, I want to say 2055 is going to be the golden age of the 21st century. Okay? Every century has its golden age, and it's about a 25 to 30 year span. Now, it's not to say that they'll advance or that they'll have better times, but like, during this time, that's usually the height of that century, There's like a random, well, not exactly random, but ever since the Roman Empire fell, there has been a 25 to 30 year span of just, the height of whatever dominant civilizations are at the time, or whatever upcoming dominant civilizations are, or whatever falling civilizations are there, that kind of thing. Especially, not so much China, although that is a thing. I really kind of doubt it with China. But potentially, the next golden age will probably be on South Africa. I made theories, I made videos about it. But the current, golden age, at least if you're talking in terms of per country, it would definitely be the U.S., okay? The USA, and I know I'm kind of being cocky because I'm an American and all, but, I'm going to be honest, the U.S. never really had a golden age, They might talk about, the good old days, but the U.S., if you're talking in terms of being a country or a nation, never had a golden age. Now, there might be a golden age of your generation. There might be a golden age of, when I was growing up, you could get a full video game and get the full thing, and that was it. I get it, but, dog, I'm talking about the country. I'm not talking about when you were 36, I don't know what else to tell you. That kind of thing. Now, you might not be 36. You might be my age, time of recording. Or you could be, a completely different age by the time you're watching this. And time of recording, I'm currently 19 years old. Pushing 20, by the way. I know, shocker. But it's whatever, It's not the end of the world. Or maybe it is. I don't know, man. Yeah, again, I'm outside. The weather's warm. Springtime. At least time of recording. Because, the weather's always changing. Time in my universe doesn't exactly work the way it does online. Time in the real world. But in real life, maxing will become a thing. And I bet you there will at least be another decade or two of just being super chronically online. But even then, that will probably be long before, or long after, then I'm alive, And there's a couple of more things I want to say before I go, so I got time. Again, I'm holding this on my phone. Have you ever noticed that a lot of the original Hollywood films and original books, songs, movies, TV shows, video games, all that stuff, their original actually new stuff is buried under a bunch of bigger IP or all this other stuff? And that's why I think Project Hail Mary worked in 2026, because it was a surprise. And it was an adaptation of like a book or whatever, but it was still like original in the way of being a good story, you know? It wasn't the, oh, you had the power inside of you all along trope, you know? Like, at least when it comes to Lego Ninjago, they'll take that storyline, flip it on its head, and just, like, create a free will story out of it, you know? An individual free will story. That kind of thing. Even if you come from a part of the world that doesn't believe in, you know, free will or individuality. That's what that is, you know? It makes it really cool, and it makes it really watchable, it makes it really good, makes it new and original every single time somehow, you know? And somehow it always ends up in some big battle, you know, recently. Or actually, I guess that's what they've been doing, you know, for a while. Well, anyway, what else? The dandelions are over here. They're all yellow and shit. There are many problems in this world or universe, potentially, because I'm saying that because in the future, I know that Earth maybe become a nation or a country at one point. I don't know if it will happen, but if it does happen, that's probably because we'll start invading other planets by that point, you know? Where we can just get to other planets within, you know, days, within like years, days, weeks, you know, months, weeks, I don't know, hours, minutes, seconds, nanoseconds, perhaps. And, you know, people are like, oh, go to gym. Brother, even if you go to gym, it's not going to fix your depression. Okay? It's not gonna fix your fucking depression. Right? Can you quit doing the depression wars, you know? Who's more oppressed? Not very good. Okay? Who has it worse? Why should I focus on who has it worse? Who has it better? I wanna know who has it better, you know? Like you might go, oh, what about the rich fucks? No! That's not what I'm talking about. They're a part of it, but they're not exactly doing better. You know, they just have a lot of money. They're not exactly great. But, you know, as they say, the show must go on. And entertainment is really starting to change up. But I'm going to give it the next, till 2030. Maybe there will be some changes, possibly. But not a guarantee, at least for Hollywood anyway. But when it comes to places like, say, South Korea, Japan, not so much China, India, I assume, a few African countries that I can think of, definitely South America, not Europe. Let's see, Oceania, perhaps. In North America, maybe a few parts of Canada, maybe a few parts of Mexico. Jamaica! Shout out to them. You know, and Poland, I guess. Because, I don't know, Polish. And then here in the USA, you know, there are a lot of movies getting made from, like, Texas, Florida, especially Arizona, you know, a few from Hawaii, but it's Hawaii. There's quite a few being made from Alaska, and surprisingly a lot being made from places like, say, you know, Jackson, Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, and Adrian, Michigan. And I know I'm titling all Michigan, but, like, just a lot of movies coming out, you know? But it's original, like, underground indie stuff, so it's like, barely anybody knows it. It really sucks, though, you know, because you don't really have that monoculture behind it, so there's not really much knowledge to really say, hey, check out this movie, you know, when nobody really knows it. And even if you get the niche reference, it's still like, what the fuck, man? You know, like, why does everything have to be so hyper localized now? You know, like, it's a good thing in the sense of like, oh yeah, now I can do something that's, you know, cool and original to my specific area. You know, like that does give where you live specifically. You know, especially if you live in just a random nowhere place. Like, it does give it some, like, unique chutzpah to it. Some, you know, special thing to you. I get that. But, like, there's no shared culture anymore with society. Now, there still needs to be individualism, and there still needs to be free will. Things like that, you know? Because, obviously, that's how it should be in society, and that's how I want it to be. Things like that, and more about liberty than democracy. Now, democracy can be great and all, but it practically means nothing if you don't have the freedom, the liberty and freedom to do so. You know? That's practically what it is. And look, I'm not saying that it's the end of the world as we know it. You know, the West hasn't exactly fallen. I mean, it did. But we're so back, man. We are so back. Okay? Like, nigga, that's crazy. You know? Like, you gotta understand. Poop in your pants right now. Liam Smith, poop in your pants right now. Don't ask questions. Just consume product, then get excited for next product. Perhaps that was maybe JoJo's reference. Nah, that was on me. You know. But hey, I'm not gonna go attack you for doing whatever you do. You know, attack you like I'm Empress from Lego Ninjago Dragons Rising. You know, like, I own this land. This is mine. You know, I'm supposed to be the good empress. Shut the fuck up. Okay? I don't like female philosophers. They're pieces of shit. I don't like modern philosophers too much. But, like, I don't mean to be sexist here, but can you stop using your mouth? Like, can you stop opening your mouth in, language sounds? Can you stop opening your mouth in the form of language sounds? Okay? Let me repeat that again. Stop opening your mouth in the form of language sounds. I hope you got that through. Okay? Like, I hope you understand that in your skull. Don't even think about it. Or maybe do. I don't know. Damn. You know, not gonna lie, I'm running out of topics to talk about. Let's do one more thing, and then maybe we'll go. What else? You know, I guess we could go back to entertainment here. I really wish there was just like a show that most people knew and it was just like getting really big and everything. Because I'm more of a TV show guy than I am a movie guy. I mean, don't get me wrong, movies can be good or whatever. I have my favorite movies, you know. My big three top movies would be, I think, if I were to put it in order, would probably be, that's kind of a hard one now that I think about it. Oh man, how should I put this in order? Damn. Movies that I like. Man, it's very hard. Very hard to think of movies that I like. Big three. I don't know. Where could I go with this? Man, it's just so hard to fucking think of it. I guess in third place? Whatever. Would be maybe 10-10, you know? And I'm putting it in third place not because it's bad or anything. It's just because, you know, it's one of those, like, you don't necessarily have to understand the reference, but you just have to, like, understand English and kind of the context of the movie. But, like, it's generally a pretty good movie. And then my second place would be The Prince of Egypt. You know, for a lot of people that might be their number one movie, but for me, I'm going to put it second here because I've only watched it like once and I don't really remember much of it. But it's still a really, 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 really good movie, you know? And then number one, for me, at least personally, would be Nightmare Before Christmas. Nightmare Before Christmas. Okay? That's a really, really good movie. I watch it every single year that I can. You know, like at least once or twice a year. Or maybe more if I get the chance. But usually I try to watch it at least once a year. You know? In the minimum. You know, minimum once a year. Especially right around, like, after Halloween, but before Christmas. Especially on Thanksgiving Day. Because I'm, like, in the middle of the two. For obvious reasons. You know, like, that's the ideal day to really watch Nightmare Before Christmas on. For me. You know? Like, I grew up on the movie. I've been watching it pretty much, again, every year. And the only year that I really skipped on, you know, watching Nightmare Before Christmas was 2024. You know? Because, well, that particular year I didn't really get to watch it or whatever. But, you know, yeah, that's basically it. Anyway, any thoughts or ideas or any topic you want to talk about, you can either make your own video about it or have your own comment section, or put it in the comment section if you want. Any thoughts, ideas, answers, or questions, or perhaps, if you want to, something unrelated to what I'm talking about in this video. But yeah, I've been IRL maxing here so far for however long. And I gotta end this video so I can, you know, do some stuff, you know, in real life, offline. Anyway, that's the end of the video. So I shall see you later. Or probably not. Bye.